Good morning, teacher and classmates. Today, me and my group want to talk to you about one of the most important crises that is occurring right now and that is affecting some of the most vulnerable communities in the world, climate change. At its core, climate change is nothing more than the long-term weather patterns that define our planet. We got the consistent temperatures, the predictable rainfall, and the seasonal winds that shape our continents and our lives. These patterns are the very foundation upon which societies are built on, dictating agricultural practices, water resources, and the stabilities of our environments. Meanwhile, for indigenous populations across the world, this connection to the climate is particularly profound. Their cultures, livelihoods, and their very own identities are deeply interwoven with the health and resilience of their ancestral lands. They possess a generation of accumulated knowledge on their ecosystem that has allowed them to thrive and often challenging environments. However, the stability of these climates is now under a severe threat. Human activity, primarily the burning of fossil fuels, is driving a rapid and crazy shift in global weather patterns. The consequences are far-reaching and undeniable. We got rising sea levels that are affecting our coastal communities, a surge in extreme weather events, from devastating hurricanes to prolonged droughts, a disruption in the food sources, and the unraveling of a delicate ecosystem. While climate change is a global issue, its impact is not felt equally. Today, we turn our faces to the front lines of this crisis and how indigenous populations, despite contributing the very least to these global challenges, are often the first and the hardest hit by these devastating consequences. Now, my partner.
Were turned off by the sea. The people had to start to sleep in hammocks to prevent the sea level from reaching them, although it was sometimes unavoidable. Not to mention the difficulties that the students and teachers experience when trying to teach their classes. This unsustainable situation is what led thousands of indigenous people to make this tough decision. Although the life in the city is not ideal either, um, some Gunas report that they have a constant lack of basic services such as water and electricity, sometimes for more than 1 week, as well as the lack of a hospital. But what about those who stayed in the island? House by house is padlocked. About 1,000 people left, leaving just 100 people there. Entire families are destroyed. Children are wondering where are their friends and when they're gonna come back. For them, their island is now just an abandoned land. In the words of Delfino Davis, before you could hear the children screaming and the playing in the corners. There was music everywhere. Neighbors were fighting, but all the sounds have escaped. Such a sad quote, right? Leaving the island was and continued to be a great challenge because for almost 200 years their culture has been based on the sea. But despite the constant challenges, this community remains optimistic as they seek to make Iberjala their new home.
Climate change is not only an environmental issue, it's also a cultural one. Around the world, diverse cultures are being affected by climate change through its impact on the environment, like rising temperatures, droughts, floods, and the loss of biodiversity. These environmental changes directly affect agricultural practices, food sources, and the ecosystem that sustain communities, especially indigenous people who depend on nature for their survival and cultural identity. Let's see some specific impacts. Indigenous communities are often the most vulnerable to climate change because of their way of life and cultural heritage being deeply connected to nature. Their traditions, knowledge, and rituals are shaped by the land, the seasons, and the environment that surrounds them. Agricultural and food security. Climate change alters rainfall and temperature patterns, which affects crop production and food availability. This can lead to serious social and economic consequences, particularly for rural and subsistence farming communities. Cultural heritage. Rising sea levels and erosion threatens archaeological sites and areas of cultural importance. In addition, traditions and festivals that are tied to seasonal changes and natural events are being disrupted or lost altogether. displacement, and migration. In many regions, climate change is forcing people to leave their homes. Coastal and rural communities are especially at risk, as flooding, droughts, and land degradation make it difficult to survive in traditional ways. Let's see some examples. Here in Panama, the Gunayala region has already been affected by global warming. Communities there are dealing with the land salinization and declining agricultural productivity, which threaten both their food and security of their way of life. Coastal communities are being affected by rising sea levels and coastal erosion. This leads to the loss of their home, farmland and access to natural resources. These changes disrupt local economies and centuries-old cultural practices centered around fishing.
Well, now let's go with the conclusion. We know that climate change is having a deep and serious impact on indigenous cultures around the world. Indigenous people have lived closely with the land, the water, and the animals for thousands of years. Their traditions, belief, and daily life are closely tied to the natural world, so they rely on the land to grow food, to hunt, to fish, and to gather plants for medicine. They also hold important ceremonies and pass down stories that are connected to the seasons, the animals, and the places they live. But nowadays, because of climate change, everything around them is changing very fast. So, because of this, the weather is becoming more extreme. Rains do not come when they are needed. Rivers are drying up. The sea is rising and slowing land. Forests are disappearing, and well, the animals are moving away or dying. So when this happens, indigenous communities struggle to find food, clean water, and also places to live. It becomes harder for them to continue in the traditional ways of life that they have been passed down through many generations. This is not just about losing homes or jobs, it's about losing a connection to the ancestors, to the traditions, to the language, and spiritual belief. Well, uh, it threats the very heart of the indigenous identities. So, young people in the indigenous communities may find it difficult to learn the old ways when the environment they need is no longer there. Ceremonies based on the seasons and the movement of the animals may no longer happen. Special plants and animals that are important to their culture may disappear, and well, this can cause like a pain, sadness, and a sense of loss that it's hard to repair. However, even in the face of all these challenges, indigenous people continue to show strength, wisdom, and leadership. Many indigenous communities are working hard to protect their lands and to share the knowledge about how to live sustainable with nature. They have always known how to take care of the earth without harming it. Their ways of farming, fishing, hunting, and living with the land are examples of how human can live balanced with nature. And well, it's very important that the world listens to the indigenous voices. They should have the right to make decisions about their land and resources. And well, government and organizations need to respect their rights. Support the effort to protect the environment and learn from their knowledge. Indigenous people should not be pushed aside. This, thank you very much.